wish I could tell you that these books are a prop, but they're actually just a product of me never putting anything away. And I still don't really know where to put them, so I guess they can just hang out there. Best guesses of the timestamp down below where I knock them over with my flaily talky hands win absolutely nothing, except for the joy of being right. That's usually enough for me. Anyway, let's talk about how I doubled my reading last year and how you can do it too. And welcome back to another video. And no, the title of this video is not clickbait. It instead refers to the most asked question that I get. Why is it so dark in here? To be light! Be bright like my illuminating content. So yes, back to my most asked question, and that is, how do you read so much? Which I always interpret, I think, correctly as, and how can I read that much? And I'm pairing that with my next most asked question, which after watching my stats video for last year is, how did you read so much more than the years before? And as always, my bookish lovelies, your wish is my command. Your little Scottish gay mama is here to provide. And specifically what I hope I'll be providing today is helpul tips and tricks for you to double your reading with a handy dandy ADHD friendly section. Because your girl's not just a fat queer witch, she's also neurospicy. Us queers enjoy all kinds of boxes. Okay, so first up, if you're here, then I am going to assume that you already live by and follow the following maxims. 1. Reading is not a competition, and if you treat it as one, you will lose. 2. You will never read as much as somebody who does this for a full-time job. And if you try to, you will die. A bit dramatic, but I'm kinda serious. Not only will you die, but so will your love of reading. Just sinking in amongst the stacks of the cascading book avalanches, drowning in the weight of the pages that you put on yourself. Because 3, there will always be someone who reads more than you. There will always be somebody finishing books faster than you, and that is because they are a monster and they deserve bad things to happen to them. I'm just kidding, I'm punchy today. Nobody deserves bad things to happen to them. Although those people are still monsters, and some of them self-identify as such. Trust me, I have a best friend who reads on average 400 books a year. She knows what she is. But in all seriousness, there will always be somebody who is reading more than you, because guess what? We are not the same. And that's okay. Nothing bad will happen if you don't read as much as your monster friends. In conclusion, when it comes to reading, like everything else in your life, again, take it from your queer mama, you need to find and stay in your own lane. Trust me, it's nice there because they already have all the things that you like. Genuinely can't emphasize this enough. You have to live in your own skin and your own brain, and you have to be okay with that. And you have to stop thinking about yourself and your lovely brain as only something that has abilities and limitations that both need to be improved upon and overcome. Because that way lies sadness, my friend, and tears, and moisture is bad for books. Alright, so now that we've established all of those ground rules, here's how I did it. Last year, I tracked the reading of 105 books, which was hands down my best reading year since I started tracking books. Since I started tracking books, my numbers have been as low as 56 and as high as 82. And trust me when I say that that number varied wildly depending on how I felt that year, what the global climate was like, whether we were in a lockdown, or whether your gal was having a spicy mental breakdown. Because I have been on BookTube for a very long time, so I've had a couple of those. And what that essentially means is that from my lowest ever numbers that I tracked, I've essentially doubled my reading in the last year. And I set my Goodreads goal once again this year for 105 books, and I'm now, I think, 30-ish books through. I'll add a screenshot here, but either way, I'm actually ahead. And I've been consistently tracking ahead all year so far, which was an unheard of thing in previous years. In previous years, my reading was feast or famine, and there was nothing in between. I was either consistently 5 books or more under my Goodreads goal, or getting to the end of the month and then finishing like 8 books in a go. Boom, 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 boom. And let me tell you, down that road lies nothing but stress. It is not fun to be told by an app on your phone that you are failing constantly. And actually, that one's not on my list, but call that an added tip. A pre-tip, if you will. If whenever you are logging books on whatever app you use, you are consistently looking at that little bar that's like, you're so many books behind, and it's not giving you like fun motivation, stop doing it. You can have in the back of your mind a goal number of books that you'd like to get to, and you can keep track of those without ever setting yourself an actual goal. Because for some of us, specifically those who are not my brand of neurospicy, that doesn't act as like a looming deadline hyper-focus thing. That acts as a, I am now in a huge reading slump and I'm never going to read again thing. And here's a plus pre-tip, and that's that if you change to Storygraph like I have been doing over the last while, Storygraph gives you the option to turn that off. This is non-spawn, I just like them better. So yes, back to me, one of my least favourite subjects. The first thing that happened to me was that I discovered that I had undiagnosed ADHD, and that my particular mode of strict hyper-focus and chaos goblining was working against me, and that both of those opposing but very strong forces had to both be harnessed in different ways before I could make any kind of progress. Secondly, I threw away shit tons of my books. No, really, I did. I unhauled 1/3 of my entire library, which was around 500 books. I got rid of old books that had been on my shelves for so long that I no longer knew why I had purchased them. Books that were a very, very average read, and I knew that I was never going to read again, but they were sitting there taking up space. Books that I bought for the wrong reason, because they were hyped by other people, or because people told me, oh, that was my favourite, you really need to read it, and I felt guilty, so I bought it. Books that people had given me as gifts that I felt too ashamed to get rid of, and books that I had grown out of but had no real nostalgia for. And honestly, it was great. I have never felt better. I am a ruthless unhauler now. I treat all books in my library like potential walkers from The Walking Dead. Either it's only a matter of time and you go and die, or you prove that you were actually a human in disguise and I fall in love with you and I keep you forever. Those are the only two ways that it goes anymore. 3, I worked out what I wanted to read and why. This might sound like a bit of a Homer Simpson dope moment, but actually not that easy all the time. Because back to that old reading is not a competition thing that I mentioned earlier, your why is not going to look like anybody else's why. And I don't just mean the like, oh well, I read because I love books, or I have been reading since I was 3 years old and that's what I do. I'm talking about why you want to read the particular books that you like to read. My reading has changed and I have gone with it. Life finds a way, and so will you if you just admit to yourself what you actually want to read and throw away all of these pressures. The extremely dumb thing that we all do, which is, but this book is really, really, really high. Everybody else loves it. I know I'll probably hate it, but I'm gonna buy it anyway. Or my favourite booktuber, who I watch mostly because I love them and their personality, they love this book. And it's not in a genre that I've ever tried before or ever had any inclination to pick up, but I might like it because they like it. Or X company is doing a really, really shiny edition of this book and it is absolutely beautiful. I will never read it and I will beat myself up about spending that 90 quid on it, but I'm gonna buy it anyway. And don't get me wrong, doing one of the above every so often is fine, but doing that as the way that you procure your books, using those as the only reasons that you read, it's just not gonna work. Trust me, I've been there. I doubled the books that I read in a year because I stopped pretending that I wanted to read all of the books that I thought that I wanted to read. And I just started reading whatever the hell I like. And finally, I stopped beating myself up. Specifically, I stopped beating myself up for the things that I wasn't anymore. I was no longer 8, 12, 16, 19 or 21. All of the years in which I really, really devoted myself to only reading. But also all of the years in my life where I had the most time to just devote myself to reading. Most time, the least responsibilities, the most resources that were free to me. And now I am not any of those ages, and now I need money and sleep because your gal's getting older, and you know what? It's a privilege to do that, so we really should stop complaining about it. And this also applies to when you look at your favourite booktuber out there who does this full time as a job, and you're like, why can't I read as many pages as them? See all of my previous notes and stop being mean to yourself. But let's assume that you have all of that down. Let's assume that you have done a head tidy and a library tidy and you're ready to move on to the practical tips. And if you haven't, then stop here. Do those things first, because none of these tips will be as valuable to you or as sustainable as they will be after you've done all of that other stuff. And I'm splitting these tips into 3 different categories. So 1, easy mode. These are some of the very basic tips that I give to everybody and have been giving to everybody for years. You may already do some of these things and these are a nice reminder. Either way, tip number 1, what do you do with 5 minutes? If your answer is disassociate, doom scroll, or a combination of both, then me too! Except that was the only thing that I was doing with all of my free 5 minutes. Which means that I was not doing what I am about to tell you to do, and that is pick up your book instead. Now you're probably like, you put this in the easy section, girl. And I do agree with you, because picking up your phone and doom scrolling is a learned thing. It is a thing that your brain has learned to do without any executive function whatsoever. Like every other habit that we form in our lives, it is a default. That means that you don't actually have to push yourself to do it. So if you just find yourself doom scrolling and are like, wait, why am I here? Don't blame yourself too much, because your brain is doing that because it finds it comfortable and comforting. And it only took 1 or 2 instances of you doing that and finding it comfortable or comforting for it to become a habit. And it takes a while to reprogram and unlearn that. And do I exclusively read my book instead of doom scrolling or disassociating? No. But I do an average amount of both these days, which trips me into tip number 2, which is making reading a habit. Because whenever anybody says to me, oh, you need to make reading a habit, what I hear is, I have decided that after work and before I'm allowed to pick up my phone or play games or anything else, I have to read 50 pages. Or I have a minimum page count for the week and I have to hit that regardless of how I separate up those pages. And all of those things are legitimate tips. All of those things are things that you can do if you are somebody who can regulate yourself like that. But for me, what I heard and what my brain did were 2 very different things. And if you have fallen into a rut or found that you've tried any of these methods and none of them have worked for you, then maybe come along and try the ADHD version of that. Because ADHD brains are literally numbed by routine. The more routines that we have and the more that we have to try and stick to them constantly, the more our brains literally turn off. If you have ADHD, then you're inspired not by routine but by whimsy, by something new every single week. Every week I set myself a completely arbitrary number of goals and I didn't tell anybody about them. Seriously, the only person who knows about this is lovely spouse Harry, and he never knew what the goals were, because I knew that the minute that I told anybody out loud that that was what my goals were for the week, I was going to fail the goals. Then there were targets and I'm not good at those. Instead, I kept secret plans. So sort of every single week I would decide completely arbitrarily, okay, from this stack I need to finish 2.5 books, or I'm going to roll a random number generator to tell me how many pages I'm going to have to read for the day, or every 2 hours I need to read this number of pages. And sometimes those goals were, honestly, not going to lie, a little bit unhinged, such as every day this week I'm going to start a new book and read 100 pages of it on that day. But guess what? It got it done, because in doing all of these crazy tasks, reading became its own reward. And often when I set myself one of these goals, I would end up reading over that goal. Often I would get myself into the mode of reading and I would just keep reading. And that is because reading itself is a learned skill. It is a habit. Your body remembers things. It has muscle memory. So the more you pick up and open your book, or you pick up and you unlock your Kindle, the more you do that, the more your body will remember to do that, exactly like when it picks up and doom scrolls through your phone. Brings me to the last tip in this category, and it's in the easy category because, you know, it feels like a fundamental thing we should be doing, but a lot of the time I wasn't doing it. Don't go anywhere without your book. Even if you have absolutely no intention of reading your book in the next couple of hours, take that book with you. Put it down next to you. Sit it with your drink or your remote control or your Switch. And genuinely, just for like an added level of reinforcement, I often put my book on top of my phone, because then if I want to get my phone, I have to have a conscious effort to touch my book first and pick up my phone, which often then makes me go, oh, I should maybe do this instead of that. And you can extend this, literally have your physical book next to you, but you can have a copy of that book on all of your devices. If you, like me, have recently started to abuse your local library, then you can have the Kindle version, the audiobook version, and a physical version of that book in front of you. And again, that may feel like a no-brain thing, but actually it's really not. Giving yourself more conveniences in order for you to do the thing that you want to do, that's a big brain thing. That's smart. And so now we're going to move on to the advanced category, otherwise known as things you might not have been recommended or you might not have tried. And first up in this category, we have tabbing. In my cute little cup here, I have page flags. But like, I also have wooden mushrooms, but you know, a girl's gotta live. Page flags of all different sizes and kinds. And it's not because I like to annotate, because I do not. Your girl is not a writing in a book girl anymore. I did that for university. It's no longer fun. No, instead, what I do before I start reading a book is I tab it. For me personally, I tab it every 100 pages because that gives me quite a lot of motivation and it's a good chunk. But for you, if you're just starting out, you might want to tab more than that. Seriously, you might want to tab like every 25 pages, because every time you get to one of these little page flags and you get to rip it out, you have achieved something. Sometimes I rip a little bit too enthusiastically and I leave a little bit in my book. Tabbing my books is how I got through university, and somehow I just forgot that I was allowed to do that with books that I was having fun with, that I wasn't prescriptive reading. Sometimes I just forgot my method of like, every time I managed to take a tab out, I could have a Malteser. In all seriousness, this is one of the things that pushes me to read more pages than I thought I was going to read in a session. Because quite often I see the next page flag and I'm like, well, that's not actually that far away. And so then I hit it without trying. Next up, reading sprints. If you are new to BookTube, then you maybe don't know what reading sprints are. I have had a surprising number of comments over the last little while from people who have never sprinted before and don't have a freaking clue what I'm talking about when I tell people I sprint with my patrons every week. Reading sprints are based on the Pomodoro method of studying, and that method suggests that your brain can actually concentrate on one activity for long periods of time without regular breaks. So in short, what Pomodoro sprints do is they break up your tasks into regular amounts of time. I think the default for the Pomodoro method is that you work for 45 minutes, then have 15 minutes off, and you do a set of 4 of those before you have a longer break. For me, what I have discovered in my personal little ADHD journey is that 40 minutes is my absolute upper threshold. Any longer than 45 minutes and I'm out. But when I say that sprints can help you in your everyday life, I cannot emphasize enough they can help you in your everyday life. Because what I do now is that I do whatever I need to do for 40 minutes, and then for 20 minutes, which again, your tolerance may vary, but is how long I need, 20-minute break in between those sprints is for reading, which once again makes reading its own reward. It makes reading the thing that you are doing to reward yourself for doing all the other things that you need to do, like cleaning your home and feeding yourselves and your loved ones. It stops looking at reading as a thing that you have to achieve and puts reading into the category of a thing that you get to do. And let me tell you, it has thoroughly changed my relationship, not just with reading, but with all the other things that I have to accomplish. Next up, here's another term that you might have heard before but not actually explored, and that's the concept of immersive reading. Do you remember when you were a little kid and you would sit in class and your teacher would read you something and you would follow along with your finger on the chapter book? Do you remember how much fun that was? But do you also remember how much more you retained of plots and character names? How much more easily you were able to say, oh no, that happened in book 1 and that happened in book 5. That is because immersive reading also helps with your comprehension. It helps your brain to hold on to the concepts that are going in. Again, in short, it helps you to understand and retain the things that you are reading better. In the last year or so, I have rediscovered my love of audiobooks, but for the first time I have started to listen to audiobooks while I read my book. So many people that I talk to are like, I just wish that I loved audiobooks. I wish that I could concentrate when I listen to audiobooks, but my attention just slips off somewhere else and I miss entire chapters. And as somebody with ADHD, I understand, because my brain is never just doing one thing all on its own. But do bear in mind that for all of us, our brains are doing 50 million things at once all the time. You're taking in all of the smells, all of the sensations, all of the things you can hear. Your eyes are taking in more information than your brain is actually able to process at any one time right now. So immersive reading is an amazing way to focus your brain. And the other really good thing is that immersive reading is also the way that I started to learn to speed up my audiobooks more. And again, not all audiobook narrators will be exactly the same, but audiobook narrators are asked to slow down regular speech when they are reading aloud to you. And before we go any further, if you are one of the people who is going to tell me that speeding up your audiobook is cheating, then girl bye. The rest of this video is not for you, just leave now. There is nothing cheating about reading as long as you are what? Reading! If you are consuming words, you are doing it right. Yay! But finally, that leads on to my last tip in this category, and that is that silence is not actually your friend. Well, you might think it is. You might be one of those people who are like, I cannot read unless the circumstances are exactly perfect. I must have 2.5 candles burning. I must have shutters on the windows and nobody may speak to me. And you might be right. You might. But I doubt it. Because once again, your brain is doing other things other than just reading. And once I worked out that my brain focuses so much better on the primary task at hand when it has other stimulus going on in the background, the better I got. I used to be, when I was younger, an I have to read in silence person, and then I moved in with a Harry. And now, quite honestly, I can read anywhere with anything going on in the background. It's not a problem. But what I choose to listen to when I read is ASMR rooms. Bonus points if you can theme that ASMR room to what is happening in your book. Brain will eventually automatically associate that with reading. Every time you whack on a particular playlist, your brain will immediately be like, huh, it's reading time. And finally, here we are at the hard methods. The reading tips which are only for the strongest of readers. First of all, this stack that I have gently placed in the corner here, it's actually my currently reading stack. Let me just, oh, that could have gone wrong. Let me just show you it. Yeah. Now you might look at this and you might go, that is out of hand. And to be fair, this one is bigger than any of my other normal currently reading stacks. However, you guessed it. This tip is multiple books at once. They are what are going to get you through. Overwhelmingly, the people in my life who read the most books do not just read one book from start to finish in isolation. They read little chunks of lots of different books every day. That wasn't what 8, 12, 16, 19 or 21-year-old Leanne was doing. And I used to beat myself up for this in the extreme. I used to be like, oh, why can't you just finish one book? Why, when you do those reading updates with your best friends, do they go, oh, have you finished that? And you're like, no, but I started 4 other things. Why do you never feel like you're finishing anything? But once again, see previous tip, I have stopped beating myself up and started embracing this method, and my god, it has worked for me. For you, whether that means that you have different genres on the go at the same time, you might be reading a non-fiction book and a fantasy book and a lit fit book. You might only be able to read 2 books at once. Maybe your brain wants to read 5 books at once. You might have an audiobook, an ebook and a physical book on the go all at the same time, and they might all be different genres. However you do it, as long as you are making progress in every single one of those books that you are reading, you are still reading. And eventually throughout the month, those books will fall like dominoes. And that is the main caveat that I have with this one. If you are going to be reading multiple books at a time, then you need to actually be making progress in those books, because otherwise they're just a soft DNF that's sitting on your TBR that you're not picking up. That's where a lot of people get stuck and go wrong. But reading multiple books at a time is the way to go. I have converted so many people onto this in the last year alone. The next tip on this one might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but stick with me. That is, stop reading. Seriously. So many people say to me, Leanne, I'm in a slump. Oh, I've been in a reading slump for 6 months. I just cannot make progress in any of my books. Cannot make myself read. I really want to read. Just can't make myself. All that my brain wants to do right now is rot. Just want to sit and watch TV. I want to play my games. I want to do a jigsaw puzzle and listen to Taylor Swift. And to all of those people, I consistently say, consider the idea that you might not actually be in a book slump. And actually what's going on is that you don't want to read. You do want to do one of those other activities. And there is a difference here, because with ADHD I do procrastinate things that I want to do, desperately want to do, or things that I have to do in order to live, and that's different. That's the literal lack of the chemicals in my body and in my brain which makes it easy for me to get up and go, oh, I need to do that thing, then that thing, and now I can do that thing. That means that we have to figure out other ways around it. But in this case, for the majority of people who say this to me, you don't actually want to be reading. Reading is just one of your other hobbies that you do. And baby, that is okay. Once again, reading, not a competition, not an obligation. I'm not sitting here saying, well, you're just not a dedicated enough reader then, are you? If it's not your job or you don't make content about it, then it doesn't matter. Go do the other thing that your brain wants to do, because quite often, once you've let yourself do the other thing, you'll want to read again. Your brain will come back naturally to reading and you'll discover it's not a slump, it's just that you're prioritizing other things. I've put it here you're in the hard category because I own that it's actually a skill. And for me, I've sucked at it for a long time. And it's taken me years to get here, but here I am, picking up my shame and putting it in the bin. Because honestly, that's my ultimate tip for success. I am happier right now in this moment than I have been for years, and you can be too. So that's it, guys. Those are all of my tips and tricks. Those are all of the ways that I have managed to double my reading in the last year, and those are all of my from me to you pep talks. If you have got all the way through this video, then leave me the sunflower emoji down below, because this is the first day that the sun has been all the way out for a long time. And also it kind of goes with my outfit. She's lumberjack, but she's cheery. I would love to know down below in the comments what your favourite reading tip is. I love comments on videos like this because it's like, leave some advice, take some advice. And it reminds me that this community is actually lovely. If you are new here and you have enjoyed receiving my wisdom in this video, then please hit that subscribe button. And if you are a returning subscriber who is always along for the ride, then please hit that like button on your way out, because it really does help my channel. And I will see you guys really soon.